love this, sorry, book chat. And I'm looking forward to listening and learning and asking, hopefully, some thought-provoking questions.
Love it, Charisse. Love it, Charisse. And my name is Megan Park. So I am a pharmacist and informatistician. Love trying to transform what technology looks like and how we care for patients, making it more safe and hopefully a better experience for our caregivers so that they can also feel like very confident that they're helping keep patients safe. Work a lot with Janae on grant strategy, putting together some courses, this book club. Janae's organization, the Sharp Index, is near and dear to my heart. Burnout is such a problem in healthcare, so it's really a, a beautiful thing to try to intervene there. It's great to meet you.
You want me to go, or who's going next?
You can go, Dot.
Yeah, it's you. It's you. We got to hear from, or
All right.
Risa, why don't you introduce yourself and then introduce your friend?
Well, I'll share how I came to Dr. Amy Diehl. My name is Risa Lewis. I am an emergency physician and an author and a podcaster, and I am always glad to grow my network. And LinkedIn has been an amazing way to meet like-minded people. And I knew Dr. Diehl before I knew Dr. Diehl via Twitter and via LinkedIn. And I really noted that she was often publishing and highlighting articles published on equity, and specifically equity in the workplace with a particular focus on gender and women. And I remember when her book came out, and I thought the title Glass Walls was very compelling. I've heard of the glass ceiling, I've heard of glass cliff, but not glass walls. And I really liked the read, and I liked how research-based it was. And we connected on LinkedIn, and she came on. We had a great conversation on the Visible Voices podcast. And for me, it's really important that it's not like one and done. The goal is to continue to amplify each other. She's been exquisitely generous with me when I've asked her if she'd be willing to read certain articles that have had the gender bent. And, my goal is always to continue to help, the work does not just stop. And what she has written in this book is evergreen. And I think it's sort of the more it can get out on other platforms and other people meet her and meet the book, the better.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'm thrilled that you're here with us. And I'm thrilled also that you're involved in data and gender issues, things that people in our circles love. So maybe you could introduce us, tell us about the book and a little bit of your story.
Yeah. So thank you. It's great to see you again, Risa. It's great to meet you all. Charisse, Megan, Janae, and everyone else who's on this either the live stream or in the Zoom. I'm so honored and thrilled to be here today. I am going to tell you a little bit about my story, and then I'll get to how the book came about. So my name is Dr. Amy Diehl. I am a chief information officer. I work at a college, Wilson College in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. But I'm also a gender equity researcher. And so I'm going to start with my story. My story starts back when we'll start in college. If we go back to high school, we'll go back to high school. In high school, I loved math. It was my favorite subject. I won the top award for math, which I was so proud of because I beat out all my main competitors for that award were the boys in the class, and I beat them all. So that's still my most honored award that I've ever received, my 12th grade math achievement award. So anyway, then I went into college and I studied computer science because I loved math. And when I was in junior high, my math teacher said, if you like math, you should become a computer programmer. They make good money. And I didn't know what computer programming was. I didn't know what computer science was. But I had actually had taken a programming class in high school. So go into computer science in college. And I learned all about it. And when I was in college, I did really well. I got all A's. I did my work. I was rewarded with a grade. I didn't know the word meritocracy, but I believe that was what the world was. That if you put in the work, in the United States at least, if you put in the work, you get the reward. And I saw that. I saw that through my college experience with putting in the work and getting A's. And I was one of there was usually only one or two female students in in my classes at that time. But that, again, that didn't like bother me. It was, I did the work and I did well. So I graduate college, I go into the workforce and I start to experience things that are just odd and some of them disconcerting. And I think I'm doing something wrong. And, give you a couple examples, one of which was one of the first people that I met at one of my second job out of college was the department secretary, and she did not treat me very well. And I was like, I don't know why, because would go to her if I had a question or needed help, but I was certainly always kind to her. I was always like friendly. Like it wasn't like I didn't know what I was like, why she was like mean to me. And at one point, she was in charge of the computer purchase for the department, and we had basically the person who had the oldest computer got theirs replaced next on the list, and she would control that list. Well, when it got to me having the oldest computer, she skipped me, and she refused to replace my computer. And my male colleagues, I was working in IT, mostly male colleagues, right? They're like, one of them said to me, they're like, "What did you do to her?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I honestly don't know. I don't know why. And again, I thought I'm doing something wrong. I don't know what. And I would spend time with her. I actually would spend time in her office, and I would chit chat with her about her vacation or her hobbies or whatever. And, she would be nice to me. But anyway, but again, I just didn't know what was happening, right? And so another thing that happened in that job my second job out of college was that at a certain point I was promoted to lead a team that my male boss had led, and I had been watching my male boss for years. I was watching him how he led teams and things. And one thing I noticed was that if we had a meeting and we had to make a decision and we talked about all the options at the end of the meeting, if we didn't have consensus, he would pick a path and he would say, "This is what we're doing." And the team would follow along, no problem. Well, the first meeting that I was in charge of that was similarly formatted, where we had to make a decision, there wasn't consensus, and I was like, "We're going to do this." That my male subordinates were like, what are you doing? Like I could tell right away I'd lost respect with them. They're like, I don't agree with this. Like, I don't know. And I was like, I'm just like copying what my male boss was doing. So again, I thought I was doing something wrong. So fast forward, I started a PhD program in administration and leadership studies, and I started to pick up on that there were gender differences and gender equity, and women that weren't. I was starting to pick up that it was more systemic than what I was just dealing with, but I didn't know to what extent. So I figured I would study it. And so I did. And so throughout my PhD program, I studied gender barriers that were affecting women in leadership. I did my dissertation on women leaders and their experiences of adversity, which included professional barriers that they had experienced. And wrote my dissertation, figured, okay, I'm done with my dissertation. I'll just keep this. I now have this credential. I'm going to move up in the hierarchy of my organization, because that had been my goal in getting a PhD. But what I found was that I actually had fallen in love with the research that was doing. And a year after I finished my PhD, I met my now co-author, Dr. Leanne Dubinsky. I met her at a conference, and she and I started talking about our respective. She had just also graduated with her PhD. We talked about our respective research, and she had looked at women leaders in faith-based nonprofits. I had studied women leaders in higher education. We thought that the challenges that they experienced would have been very, very different, but we found out there was much more commonality than what we would have initially expected. And so we put our research efforts together. We've published a journal article about the 27 barriers that the women between the two studies were experiencing. And that started our path of collaborating on the research. A few years later, we joined up with two other researchers who were quantitative. We're qualitative researchers. We joined up with two other researchers who are quantitative to develop a scale to measure gender bias. Gender bias scale for women leaders. It's available. The questions are available on my
so
website.
any woman could take it, or
Yeah,
any.
So the questions are on my website. You can read the questions. And so the benefit of reading the questions is you can get a sense for the extent to which bias may be affecting you in ways that maybe you hadn't thought of. The scale is meant to be used across a group of people within an organization. So it's not like the implicit association test where you answer some questions and you're only a little bit biased or very much biased or you're I don't know, like it doesn't give you by the nature of the design it can't give you a score on an individual level, but it's meant to be used across across an organization or across a group of people to a group of women, I should say, to identify the biases that are impacting the women in that group. There's 15 factors, 15 gender bias barriers that are covered in that scale. But it is beneficial for an individual woman to read through the questions just to get a sense of how it might be, a quick sense of how gender bias might be impacting you. And then if you want to use it in a research or a corporate environment, you take those questions and you can put them into survey instrument and do the research that way. So I mentioned the scale because that was the genesis for the book, actually. So in developing the scale, when I mentioned Leanne and I, Dr. Dubinsky and I we had a journal article, we had these 27 barriers. We figured that they must collapse down, but we couldn't see the commonalities between them. And so it was building the scale that we were able to surface the 6 primary gender bias barriers that are covered in the book. And so after we did the scale, we had the 6 barriers, we did more qualitative research to make sure that we were surfacing as much comprehensively as much of the sub barriers, I guess, under each one, which then becomes the book. So the book covers the 6 primary barriers that are affecting women in the workplace. And like Dr. Lewis said, these weren't my favorite 6 barriers. These weren't the ones that are most often talked about in the media or even research. They were developed from a very scientific process. And so in the book, we talk about 6 barriers, and we then give strategies for overcoming each barrier. At the end of each chapter, we've got strategies. We have strategies on 3 levels. Strategies for leaders, because we believe that the only true change in organizations starts at the top, starts with the leader who set the culture. We have strategies for allies. So we all can be an ally. Allies typically, it's like you think of as being the other group, so like male allies, but women can be allies for each other, right? And then strategies for individual women. We've got 6 chapters of barriers with all those strategies. Chapter 7 we describe a gender equity and inclusion roadmap that organizations can use to assess where they're at on the road to full gender equity and inclusion. And then chapter 8 is a chapter for women, and it's about taking charge of your own success. And how you can navigate through this kind of unfortunate minefield of gender inequity and still chart a good path for yourself. So that's the overview. That's the introduction to me and to the book. I
love it.
Yeah.
We also have we already have some questions for you.
Good.
Perfect. Should we start with Risa asked? Do you want to ask your question? Or
Sure. When I speak with people that have written books, like we all change when we write a book. I mean, we even change when we put an article out into the world. But I know a little bit of how the book sort of changed you and how you're different. But what I'd love to know is, based on all the times you've now presented on it, podcasted on it, seen even more literature come out, and I forgot exactly what year you published it. Was it 23?
Yeah, 2023. Yep.
Yeah. Like, what would be your 2.0 version of your book?
Excuse me, what would be my 2.0 version of the book?
Yeah. Like add, subtract, highlight, emphasize, anything.
Well, okay. So first, the thing I would emphasize since doing the research for the book, and then since having the book come out, it really solidified for me that unfortunately, all of us as women, like none of us are exempt from dealing with gender bias, either in general society or in the workplace, which is what my book focuses on. But it's really just solidified that for me. And even women that think that they haven't experienced this, because they're like, oh, I was like, I don't think I've ever experienced, like I've had, like, no, you've experienced it. You just haven't been able to recognize it. When I did my dissertation research, I talked to 26 women, and I had at least 2 of them that told me they had never experienced gender barriers. Like they told me that flat out. One was like, I don't believe in the glass ceiling. I don't believe it. And then like they would go on to explain to me ways in which like oddities, like this one woman called it oddities, like things that would happen. This one woman was a president of a college, and her college had received an airplane as a gift, like a small airplane. And so to receive the airplane, the donation of the airplane, she had to go out to like the whatever the airport and actually climb up onto the plane. Well, nobody had prepared her for the fact she'd have to climb up onto this plane. And so that meant that she was like dressed in a skirt and heels. And so getting up on the plane, I don't even know I don't remember the outcome, whether she was able to get up on it or not, but nobody had prepared her for that. And she was like telling me, I don't believe in the glass, in the glass ceiling or anything, but then she starts talking about oddities. Like she just didn't, put the two together that, hey, maybe the workplace is systemically made by men for men, that nobody even could think that, the way women, are socialized to present in the workplace could be a barrier to doing one's job. So that's the kind of the main thing. Risa. The other thing I'll say is this, I usually talk about this at the end of the talk, but the 2.0 version of the book is actually our next book in progress. And so Dr. Davinsky and I
was
are
leaving a plant in the audience. I had no idea, and this is exciting. This is great.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
It's the best accidental plant. Yeah.
Exactly.
So in the book, we cover, the focus was the identity factor of gender. Okay. And we do talk a little bit about other identity characteristics, race and age, motherhood, certainly, as they fall into into the 6 barriers. But what our next offshoot of the research is how identity-based bias impacts women at work. And so we've collected data. We are currently analyzing our data and preparing to write the next book. It's currently, the working title is Excuses, Shattering the 6 So-Called Reasons Why Women Are Never Quite Right at Work. And we've actually published some articles on this already. We had one article in Harvard Business Review that went a little bit viral. And it was about ageism and women. And it was like basically that no age is the right age to be a woman leader. So what we found in our data was that, well, when we were reviewing the data, when I was reviewing the data, we have all this data categorized by age, and we would see the first woman would say, I was told I was too young to lead, or too young for that promotion. Next woman would say, I was told I was too old, so I wasn't even considered. And then the third woman would be like, well, I was told middle age wasn't quite right either. And so we quickly realized that it was like just an underlying excuse, for the gender bias, right? Because it was like no age was right, And so like for men, where men get this often are thought to get this career sweet spot in middle age, 40s and 50s. What I found with the women was that as soon as they were no longer perceived as being too young, it was almost like immediately or overnight, they were perceived as to be too old. Or it was some other excuse. And so age is just one of the factors that we're going to look at. Race, ethnicity, if I can say it, is another one. Parental status, marital status, the relationship status. Women's communication is, considered never quite right, no matter how we communicate. So we're going to look at all of the identity-based criticisms of women, and then I'll get similar to what we did with glass walls, is not only talk about how these present, how they've impacted both everyday and prominent women, but then also give solutions for leaders, allies, and individual women. And we are very, very, like when we wrote the book, we knew that we weren't just writing it, like it wasn't going to work to write it to give solutions only to women, right? Because like basically, this is not like, none of our work is fix the women type of work. We do give solutions for how women can navigate or overcome adversity, kind of navigate through the barriers, but we really put the onus on leaders and then ask allies to come alongside and support. So solutions are always on all three levels.
I really like that what you said, because like I have so many friends who are, we talk about this and we're like, we don't need, it's the women don't really need to know that this is happening.
No.
They already know.
Yeah.
They already
Yeah.
know, you know,
Yeah.
like, yes. So having it at every level and actionable stuff is so, so important.
Yeah.
Sharice, you have a question. We're going down there. Look, guys, we have 3 more questions already.
Oh, am I asking my own question?
Do you want to, or do you want me to read it?
I
You're
don't
free.
mind. I don't mind
You
at
ask
all,
it.
actually.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's an important one.
Yeah. Super important,
So-
super timely.
I know, right? So right now, the way I put it was gender equity is challenging and tricky right now. Where historically some organizations claim to be committed to diversity, nowadays they get rewarded for being publicly anti-DEI.
Mm-hmm.
So my question was, where do you see persistent blind spots among leaders where they're choosing to just go anti-DEI instead of creating paths to leadership in a more organic or what I call native way? Like, you don't have to be outward saying like, oh, we're very inclusive and that type of thing. You can be seamlessly inclusive of people. Where do you see those persistent blind spots?
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about with the organizations that have come out and said, okay, now we are removing all of our diversity goals and, removing all the DEI stuff from our website and like whatever else they're doing. I think, how committed were they in the first place, right? Like, was it just all like, I'm going to put this out here and say that because, I think that is at the time politically helpful for me. And now I think the politically helpful thing to do is to take it all down. Like, they were never really committed, in the first place. But there are organizations out there that have been committed and have always been committed. And it's not just diversity for the sake of diversity. Like, we all know that, I say in terms of the gender world, like, it's not enough just to add women and stir, and you're going to have then therefore a gender inclusive workplace. Because we know that there are lots of organizations and lots of sectors even where women do make up the majority of the people in the sector, but the people at the top are still men, right? And white men, usually the affluent white men, right? But the organizations that have committed, like, there are organizations who have not backed down, like even with the political winds the way that they are, right? And those are the organizations I think that have really been truly committed to, because they realize that it's morally right and they realize it's a net benefit for their business, right? And not only for their business in the sense of like the employees and like what they're creating or the services they're providing, but for their customer base, I think Target is a great example of, that's one that pulled back, right? And they saw their customers, not thinking about who their customers are. Their customers ran away. They're like, we'll go to wherever, we're not going to go here because we were, one of the reasons that we were, patronizing your business was because you had, stated that you were, that you believed in the values of diversity, equity, inclusion, but, and now that you're saying that you don't, like, I think they didn't understand, the full, like, I don't think they had, they're just like responding to the political wind rather than really thinking about it holistically. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it does. That's exactly what I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Like, they didn't really mean it if it was
Yeah.
that much of a problem. Also, like, Costco did well.
Yeah.
As a fan of Costco, I was glad. But also watching that from Target, it's like, who was in charge of that marketing? Like, they must have been, those are the people who are always like, yeah, we care so much about burnout. We care so much about mental health when it's popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the people who are like, we want to work with a nonprofit. We want to work with women. And then they like, what they mean is they want to use you for attention.
Yep.
Like, they want to get the benefit.
And like, we talk about in chapter 1 is male privilege. One of the sub barriers of examples of male privilege is tokenism. And it's this idea that you have that one or two, that small, very small group of hand-selected individuals who you're like, look, I've got a woman leader in my leadership team. I've got this, this person of color or, whatever. Like, look, we're diverse, but are their voices being heard? Or is there more than one or two of them? Is there enough that they can have their voices joined together to make in that case, not, right?
I think what also it's sad because right now the way like the targets of the world are responding to the idea of inclusion and equity, now the masks are all off. So even if the wind blows back the other way, those who look for genuineness or authenticness are not likely to go back that way. There's no, I can't even tell you the last time I was in a Target. But I feel like it's a sadness to it too, because now it's like, okay, now we've seen that you really don't care. And, it's not likely that that's going to change again.
Right. It's not it's like not like they took the step kind of like it was just, it seemed like a quick decision based on, again, the political wins without thinking through the long-term, ramifications. Like if you're a Target customer, you're a Target customer for years, for life, right? As long as Target's there, you're going to go back, if you feel that is a place that, represents you, your values, et cetera. And if you break that trust, then it's very, very hard to get it back.
Very hard.
Amy, I wanted to share that I really like that you led with this story about early on the challenge that you had with the administrative assistant, because I do think it is the majority dynamic is man-woman. However, commonly, all of us have had experiences of woman-woman. And I don't think as much is written about that. There is stuff written, some people call it the queen bee syndrome. What did you do at the time, real time, and how do you think we should respond in the workplace when we're faced with these types of challenges?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I did real time, because it is part of the answer for what you can do to, like these solutions that we gave. And I talked about that a little bit, where I'd spend time with her. I would go into her office. Hey, how are you doing? Tell me about your vacation, talk about your hobbies. The thing I found that a challenge for this particular person was she would be fine and nice, to chat, but when something came up that she didn't like, that, that I needed help, or that, she needed to, I don't know, she would just turn on me, and so that was the challenge. And the way that resolved was I outlived her. She eventually retired. I just had to figure out sometimes I would use the strategy of sending a mail. Like I would send one of my male subordinates, like, hey, I need something from her, this administrative assistant. Can you go ask her? Because I knew they would get a better response than what I would. But if you fast forward then to the book, so as I was writing the book, female hostility it's in chapter 5 under hostility. Not all hostility comes from men. Women, I always say we've all been socialized into the same system. Women are working in these male-normed environments. Which means that women have learned that to get ahead, they need to, one, maybe act like the men, two, protect their own turf if they've, gained any turf. So this one thing this woman was doing, she was trying to protect her little kingdom. But they're doing it from a place of insecurity often. So we break down female hostility into two types, one called queen bee behavior and the second type called mean girl behavior. So queen bee behavior happens when it's somebody who's above you, somebody at the top who fails to actively promote or help women under her, or sometimes actively blocks opportunities for women underneath her. And the reason that they do that is often because they have got the very real perception that there's only room for one. If I lose my spot, the only way that I can retain my spot is if I keep my spot. Like there's no room for someone else to come along. In the book, we talk about the example of Katie Couric. Katie Couric had she wrote a very interesting memoir. I think it was called Going There. I read it. I was, I always like to read memoirs. I love to read memoirs especially about women, and I enjoyed reading Katie's. She actually admitted to queen bee behavior in that book. Now, she didn't call it queen bee behavior, but she talked about it. She said, I was helpful and I was supportive of the women around me, except for the women who were in her same, like the other female journalists, like the women who could potentially take her spot. So because she said, I always knew that someone younger, someone prettier, someone, could come up and take the spot that I had worked for. So she never helped those women. And she writes about this. I'm glad she wrote about it openly in the book. Like, I give her kudos for that, because it's not something that's easy to admit to as a woman, that you've not helped other women, right? Um, so that's queen bee behavior. Mean girl behavior is when it's pure women, or sometimes lower level women, against women who are at a higher position in the hierarchy, which was technically the situation I was dealing with, because this woman did not report to me, but she was the administrative assistant. I was like a manager. So in the hierarchy, like, I'm, sort of above her, but you know, but again, she was trying to protect. She had been there for years, 30 years or something, and she was trying to protect her turf. And also, I think, to assert, the other thing that happens is that as women in the overall gender hierarchy, you got men above women, right? I don't like that there's a gender hierarchy, but there is in society. And so as women, we have a shared equality. And so when women, the situation where it's a lower level women who are trying to block what the upper level women are doing, it's because they're trying to assert their shared equality as women, and they don't, like, the hierarchy of the workplace becomes an issue. Like, they can't deal with the again, it's all male, like, this is all male normed, right? It's all like, our organizations were created by men for men, and the hierarchy is one of those things. In the book, we talk about, with the mean girls behavior, there was a very interesting study about that we cite in the book. It was about something that the researchers named status leveling burden, and they talked about it in the sense of healthcare. So medical doctors, the data that they had, the female medical doctors would spend time. They would bring donuts to the nurses. They would spend their off time baking cookies, do all these things to stay in good graces with the nurses, because if they didn't, the nurses could make their lives more difficult, their professional lives more difficult, like in the surgery room, in the operating room, like by, whereas, like, the nurses would take an order from a male, like, surgeon, the female surgeons would get pushback. And, like, I don't know about you, but like, I'm on, like, the patient side. I'm not, like, I don't work directly in healthcare. Like, I don't want to know that, like, my female surgeon is getting resistance from the people who are around her supporting her, when I'm in, like, the person on the the patient on the table, right? But
Right.
the point of the study was that, so the female doctors, the women doctors, were spending all this time and going to all this extra effort to stay in good graces with the nurses. The men never had to do that. Like, they could just go home and, like, I don't know, do whatever they wanted to do on the weekend or the evening or whatever they're off. I know sometimes, also in the medical profession, they're not like 9 to 5 schedules,
Right.
And so, I think about working with my OBGYN, when I had a baby, and, she would work a 24-hour shift, go home for 24 hours, come back and work another 24-hour shift. And I'm like, I want you to, like, as my patient, I want you to rest. like, first of all, I think that's, like, this is me, but I think that's a very hard schedule. I don't know how I, like, could work 24 hours, but besides that, I don't want to know that you've had to, like, go and do all these things just to get cooperation in the workplace. So,
Right.
right.
Right. You don't want to feel like that is true. Like, women see a lot of pushback in the workplace. And if you look at medicine too, there are fewer women in leadership there, and that's by design.
Mhm.
I had a friend who shared a study about how women in more sexist environments are more likely to engage in that behavior,
That's
more
right.
likely to fight with each other. I've never heard that thing that you said that I really like, where it's like about status leveling, because I think that's a more gracious way of seeing it. I
Yeah.
have very little tolerance for this. Like, on boards that I work on, when people, like, question me, I, like, hit the roof so fast. I'm like, excuse me, what are you saying? Like, are you really wanting to question me? Because I'll bring it to you,
Yeah.
but you will not like it.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky too, I think, to work with people like Sharice and Megan who don't do it. And women have to be selective about that. And it's a lot sometimes. And, like, another person on the call, Rachel, I've worked with her. She's great. Like, but it's like the people who are great at it are aware of it. So we have we have more questions though. So
I'm
we
gonna
ready?
put in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put in the chat the link to that journal article.
Oh, cool.
Status leveling, because that's a really interesting article. It's
That's
qualitative. It's
fascinating.
qualitative research, so it has lots of like quotes and like kind of like stories,
Yeah, because
Yeah.
women like and even Sharice has told me that before. Like women don't support women. Women can stab you in the back. And especially in an environment where there are a lot of barriers.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one other thing that I learned, and like a lot of times, like I'll learn things, like I'll hear stories or learn things from like my like participants or other people's stories that I'm like, oh my gosh, like that just made sense, helped me to make sense of my own experience. And so one of the things that I learned was that, whenever these things happen from another woman, whenever another woman is hostile towards us, harasses us, whenever we're not supported by another woman, it hurts more. Like we're more surprised by it. Like it's almost like we don't like it from the men, but it's almost like more of an expectation. Like if it's a man that has like harassing you, like it's terrible, but it just hurts way worse when it's coming from a woman because we expect each other, we expect this shared solidarity, right? As women. And when we don't get that, it can feel personally, it can feel much worse.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's the next question?
All right, next question. Carol asked a question. Carol, do you want to come off and ask your question?
Yeah, my question was, does gender bias in the workplace vary by where you live? Like, because I worked for a corporation where me and a coworker ended up getting having similar performance, but when it came time for annual reviews, I saw that their percentage increase was different than mine, and it felt really unfair. And there's also like nothing I can do about it now, like not working there now. But like I wanted to know like if different places are better at that, like if politics or what if a place is like more democratic, are they friendlier towards women in the workplace? Like does that because that seems like that would have a financial impact.
Yeah. So
Very direct question. Look at that. Like, are the Democrats better? Let's be honest. Let's look at the data.
Well, first of all, there are certainly societal and cultural differences. So there's societal differences. The more patriarchal a societal is, yes, the worse it's going to be for women within organizations in that general region. We have a me and my co-researchers and I'm kind of like sitting here going to pull up the link so I can share it with you. But we did research where we compared 4 industries, okay? And we compared them using the scale that I talked about. So the 4 industries were faith-based nonprofits, higher education, medicine, and law. We compared those 4 industries using the data from the scale to see where did they land? Which one was one of the industries better than another, like for women? First of all, there was bias, throughout all of the industries. It's like I said, you can't really, unfortunately, as women, we can't get away from it. But what we found was that in general, higher education was better, more friendly to women. Law was the one at the bottom, and was the worst of the 4. Faith-based and medicine were in the middle. And so it was done based on 14, or excuse me, the 15 different sub-barriers. So what we found, like, for example, was that law was the worst in terms of hostility. It's kind of interesting to me because like they know about like they should be most of the people who are most trained in sexual harassment but they're like the ones that are the most it's just and I think it has to do with
it's like how doctors are the worst patients.
Yeah.
Like know it, so you just don't do it.
Yeah. So some of the situation with law, though, if you think about their environment, a lot of lawyers, the industry it's a 24/7 environment, although, like it's a 24/7 expectations on people working in that environment, which makes it hard for people who have caregiving responsibilities to compete with their coworkers. And it's just a very competitive, like, I use that word compete, like it's a very competitive industry, even internally, like where people are competing and they have to make sure they have so many, billable hours and things like that. But on the other end of the spectrum, higher education is in as a sector, sector is more cooperative. In higher education, you've got a shared governance model where you've had the different groups, like the faculty, the staff, the students, they all have input into the governance of the institution. So we, like there's certain things about the makeup of the industries that can make them better or worse for women, for women working in them. And I'll find the link in a minute, and I'll send you the link to that study as well.
Yeah. There are also a lot of things online about which areas are better for women. I feel like it's about pockets, though. Sometimes even within certain areas, it's bad.
Well, I also think that women have to be good strategists. So we know, like going into most careers, most sectors, women are getting 17% less than their male counterparts. I always tell women, start negotiating from 34% above. You think they're going to offer, and don't even think about settling until it gets around to that 17% that they're getting that you wouldn't be getting, because they're going to start low. So I think women need good negotiating skills. I think they have to be very tactical and strategic about when they're asking for a salary, and to value what they know instead of saying, hey, I just need a job. Say, no, I need a job that's going to feed me and mine for as long as I need to be here, and be firm on that and understand your worth.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
Charisse.
Yeah. Okay, Megan has a question.
Awesome. So, Dr. Diehl, I'm curious. So this type of thing can be really hard to talk about. And so I know I've had a lot of experiences where it's just very clear, like sexism or very clear barriers put in front of me by higher up women, by men in leadership. I remember even being in a presentation, and a man said, we cannot allow feminism of the pharmacy profession, like was in a keynote speaker that I was in. It was just wildly blatant. And it can be very difficult, though, to call that out, to correct that behavior, to really dial in and help correct that, because we're in that system of where, the man that made that comment was so blind to that issue that he thought that comment was okay to say in a mostly female audience.
Wow.
That he was speaking to. How do you go about overcoming that kind of friction of it's scary to talk about this stuff? How do you kind of manage that mindset? And then on the flip side, what has been your perceived response from men to you about this work that you're doing?
Yeah. So as far as addressing it, so it kind of depends on the situation. The first thing I say is it's always good to find your own other colleagues that are, who are like-minded. And in the situation that you were describing, where somebody who's on a stage, I'm making an assumption, but he likely has a position of authority where, if you come as an individual and are like, you might feel comfortable to say that to him. And if you do, you should, like, hey, I didn't agree with what you said. But if you don't, then it's about gathering a group of people around you and thinking about how can we address this together as a group, so that it's not just you coming alone. But there are other situations where, like the everyday stuff that happens to us in meetings, or just in interactions in the workplace. I'll give you an example of one. This was maybe a year ago now. At my work, I was in a room, a classroom, and there were 3 of my work colleagues, and then there was a vendor, a male vendor. The vendor was like an architect, and we were talking about the construction project in that classroom. The male architect referred to me as young lady in the midst of that conversation in front of everybody. And of course I knew exactly what was happening, right? Like, I've studied this, I knew what was happening. All I could do in the moment was just let it go, because here I am, I've got these 3 other people. Like, if I, unfortunately, the 3 other people, my colleagues that were there, like, they knew me well enough. I don't think it diminished me in their eyes. But as far as how I dealt with that, again, like, I chose to let it go in that moment because of being with an audience. But how to address something like that is pull that person aside later, and have that individual like, hey, like, you said this, you may not have meant it. You may have thought you meant it in a positive way, but this is what it means. Like, you're calling out my age and my gender in a conversation that has to do with construction, right? Like, has to do with work, has nothing to do with who I am, or, and so I often say, like, don't, like, if you're in the middle of a meeting and something happens and like you don't have that, don't feel comfortable or don't have the space to have like, pull the person aside later. Or again, talk to your colleagues, somebody's, trusted confidant, say, hey, this happened to me. Like, what do you suggest? Because sometimes just getting, bouncing it off of somebody else can give you the confidence to say, hey, no, that isn't right. So a couple ideas there. And the second part of your question, Megan, remind me.
Yes. So, and then what has been your response from men from this
Oh.
work that you're doing from speaking out about this?
Yeah. So first of all, I will just be upfront and honest with you. My main audience, unfortunately, is women, because women have been, we've all been, I'll say, victimized by, by bias. The men that I have, that have participated in talks that I've given, or, men who have read the book, have been men who are most who would call themselves male allies, who would say, hey, I'm a supporter. I have been in situations, this is like my favorite, not my favorite, but this is probably the most effective type of work that I feel like I do, is that when I've brought in in an organization by like a leader to say, hey, come talk to our leadership team. And so, like, the people don't have, it's not like you can choose to come or choose not to come. And by the way, I'll talk to anybody, all groups, any group, because the more that this gets talked about, the more that we can address it. But I find that the most effective change can come whenever it's people who maybe wouldn't show up, just like they wouldn't show up to this talk on this issue, or or a workshop on this issue, unless it was their leadership saying, hey, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this together, and it's important to the leadership.
No, thank you for that answer. I think that's so important to realize, and to be brave to do this, because I keep thinking about, I mean, this book is so incredible, so impactful. How do we apply it? How do you get that confidence to apply it? How do you kind of overcome that resistance to the male response? I love everything in your answer. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Love it. I'm unmuting someone. Rachel, unmute. Someone raised their hand. Guys, look, this is the first time I've used the raise hand thing right.
Crushing it.
I don't know. Hold on, let me. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, I'm driving in my car.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. This has been such a great conversation. Thanks for sharing all of your work, Dr. Diehl. I was thinking about what you said, though, about pulling someone aside and talking to them one-on-one. And what I was thinking is, well, it depends, because if you're a woman in a position of power or leadership, I actually think it can be really impactful to pause and address it in the moment, especially if it's something you are witnessing. Like, I think there's a real opportunity when you're in a position of power to set a tone and create an expectation, and to not let men get away with it, or people get away with it. The same with when you see racism, that you find a way to address it, or homophobia and transphobia and other things like that. So I was thinking about that in terms of, it depends so much on power dynamics. And obviously we need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves in terms of not getting fired for being insubordinate in a meeting, but also that when we are in positions of power, how do we leverage that effectively? And so that was what I was curious about, is what have you seen, or have you seen anything or do you have any thoughts in terms of women who are in positions of power, authority, and leadership, in terms of how they've been effective at shifting dynamics and pushing for change?
Yeah, you make a very, very good point. And too, if you are the person who has power, has the authority, or feels comfortable calling it out in the moment, do call it out. And it can be especially impactful if it's like, it can be a challenge whenever for you to call out something that's happened to you. But if you're the person coming in alongside, or the ally or whatever, coming from a third party, can be a whole lot easier to say, hey, that wasn't like if somebody had been in the room, if somebody in that room with me that day had called that out, the person calling me young lady, like that would have been very helpful.
Yeah, like I
But,
think
right?
her name's Amy, John.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So in the book, we talk about, again, we give the strategies on 3 levels because like, it's just like you're saying, like when women or men who are attuned to these issues have the chance, they have the, like we all have the responsibility to create positive change in any situation that we can. And so that can be as simple as if I'm facilitating the meeting, I'm going to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak and that everybody is heard, and that if Jane makes a statement and nobody picks up on it, or I use the heap-eating example. If Jane makes a statement and it's ignored, and then Sam says the same thing and everyone loves it, that Jane still gets the credit, because she made the statement first. So meeting facilitators can go a lot, can do a lot, as well as even allies in a meeting, or other colleagues. But other ways are, I just posted. So I'm a very prolific social media poster, and I just posted an article last night about art, and women are very vastly underrepresented in art collections, like in museums and other places, right? There was a woman, and I think her name was Jessica Morgan. She was hired to be, and she is the director of the Diehl Foundation, which is like an art foundation. And when she started, it was a very low percentage of art by women in the collection. And this was like in 2000. I have to think, hold on a second. I can tell you the year.
2015 or
2015.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
reading the post.
Are you
I
reading
looked
the
it up.
post?
I
Yeah,
looked it up.
Oh, good. You found the post.
Started in
Can you read-
2014.
Can you read the post for me?
Says women artists have been severely underrepresented in art collections. Dia Art Foundation hired director Jessica Morgan in 2014. Through a focused acquisition strategy, she increased the percentage of women artists in the collection from 6.8 in 2015 to 29% in 2025. That's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. So again,
Yeah.
she came in, she's a leader, she had a strategy, and she has made already a significant impact, because it's not that women aren't doing art or aren't artists or aren't doing fabulous work, right? It's that the people who are making the decisions about what comes into a collection, again, have been primarily people of a certain gender, a certain race, and so it tends to reflect what they find, maybe that resonates with them rather than what resonates with like the whole rest of society.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know you have like a hard stop at
Yes, I do.
5 minutes. So I wanted to thank you for your work and for coming here and for your book, and just wanted to close out by telling everyone to buy your book.
Yeah, I have.
And see if you have like last comments. Let me what?
I'm going to share, I'm going to share a slide because
Oh, I love that. Let's see.
I have a.
Everybody can share a slide, I think.
Everybody can share a slide. Yeah. Let me just give me a second here. Let me see here, because not only does it have my contact information, but if you don't have the book yet, there's a discount code on the slide. If you buy the book through the publisher, which is Roman and Littlefield, there's a 30% discount code, so you can scan that QR code. But you can also find me online. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on what was Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky, Instagram, and I tend to cross post almost everything I post. So you can feel free to connect with me there. I love making connections with folks that I've spoken to.
Awesome. Well, we'll share that too. And like, thank you for coming, and thank you everyone for your questions. I love that there are actionable things that we can do.
There are. The thing is, like, this is a hard problem for sure, but it's a completely solvable problem. Like, you break down gender bias into what it is, what processes, what behaviors make up it. Once you can identify it, then you can come up with solutions. And so it is completely solvable. And so that's the positive note that I'll leave you with today.
Yeah, that is great. It's great. It's solvable. Yep. Well, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and we will continue to learn more.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, all.
Bye.
Thank you.
That was fun.
I thought it was super fun. Let me think.